So Nate, you're now part of the coaching staff for the USA National Men's Volleyball team. I'm sure a lot of people would love that opportunity to coach at that elite level. And you're only, 26, 27?
Yep.
Right. Perhaps the youngest or one of the youngest on the staff?
Definitely the youngest.
Okay, great. So how did you get the gig? Why don't you tell us the story that leads up to that?
Yeah, certainly I've been real fortunate to have been with the programs that I've been, to have met the people that I've met. My official title is technical coordinator, and for the most part, my biggest responsibility is accumulating all the videos from all the competitions and breaking them down. We use Data Volley, which is probably the most commonly used program for volleyball statistics that pretty much everyone's using now. I'd been fortunate to have access to Data Volley back in 2007 when I was at Cal Poly, and I took it upon myself. Certainly I had some help from the outside a little bit, from people who had been using it at the time, and learning how to use this program. And just like anything else, the more you do it, the better you get at it. And I kind of developed a reputation for being proficient at Data Volley, and being able to be functional in the gym as a coach and even as a practice player at times. And so I was coaching at University of Portland in 2014. And
that was after your stint at Nebraska.
Correct. Yeah. And so I was at Nebraska after Cal Poly, and they had recruited me to come and do grad school there and work with the team doing Data Volley and analyzing video, breaking that down, and all that. So again, real fortunate to be a part of that program, and just a little bit of the right place at the right time. In terms of getting to Nebraska. So after Nebraska, got hired at Portland, and I was at Portland, loving life. It was great staff, great campus, great school, incredible city. And after the Monday after our last match of the season, I got a phone call from one of our assistant coaches at USA, Mike Wall, saying that certain circumstances had come up, and Anton Willert, who was in this position before me, essentially couldn't continue with the team going full time, and so they asked me if I was interested. And certainly, when somebody's calling and asking you to help them qualify and win the Olympics, it's tough to say no to that.
So you jumped aboard then earlier this year. What month was that?
I got to Anaheim in January 2015.
Okay.
So.
And so at that point, where was the team in terms of all the qualifier tournaments?
So qualifying really just started really within the last month. So the last competition that we had this year was the World Cup in Japan, and that's the first tournament that anybody aside from the host who are automatically qualified, that's the first tournament that anyone can qualify for the Olympics for, both on the men and the women's side, indoors. And so the tournament was a grueling tournament, 11 matches over 16 days across 3 cities in Japan. The tournament format is a round robin tournament, so there's 12 teams. We play everybody once. And in the past, before 2015, the World Cup took 3 teams. The top 3 teams that finished in the World Cup would qualify for the Olympics, and for whatever reason, they changed it to only the top 2 this year. And so that made it obviously a little bit more difficult to qualify for the Olympics. But we had a really good training block in August. The players put in a lot of work, a lot of time. So did the staff in terms of getting prepared, looking at all the teams and getting a preliminary scouting report on each of the 11 teams that we're going to play. We spent a lot of time in the gym in August, and fortunately, again, the results. Fortunately for us, the results validated the work that we put in, and certainly we got a little help from Italy on the last day, beating Poland, and that put us back in a spot to win the tournament after having lost to Poland a couple of days earlier. But took care of business against Argentina, and now we are qualified for the Olympics, which is pretty cool to say.
How does the team compare now versus the 2012 team and the 2018?
It's been interesting to see how the game's evolved even just within the last 3 years, especially on our side.
Give me some examples of how you think it's evolved.
Yeah, the biggest thing is since Coach John Speraw has been at the helm, he's implemented the BIC, the back row, quick back row attack from the middle of the court. And watching the video, it was interesting to see how little we were using that, and even with all the other teams, it wasn't quite as prevalent of an option offensively as it is now. And now, I mean, if you don't have a big attack, it's pretty limiting to your offense, and it's pretty noticeable when you don't have a pretty strong attack from the back row.
Sure.
In the middle of the court.
Do you guys ever run a BIC and a tandem?
That would cause a lot of traffic in the middle of the court, so we don't. Certainly having two options coming down the middle of the court, a front one BIC or a gap 30 gap BIC, that's enough to deal with on its own. I mean, the hitting efficiency, we track all these things. The hitting efficiency on a BIC is pretty high, especially for us. That's something that we work on a lot, and that's an option that we tend to use a lot, and it helps. It helps us if we want to attack the middle of the court. We have that that double option, and it's been really effective. So
basically, the BIC has replaced the tandem or the X.
Pretty much, yeah. There's especially on the men's side, there's not as much variation in the sense of crossing patterns, and you don't see a whole lot of teams running into. Certainly, there are some. I can't think of off the top of my head right now but I can picture some. There definitely were teams that were running crossing plays with a right side coming around and hitting a two. Brazil actually, they're one of the only teams, if not the only team, that utilizes the slide attack, going off 1 foot behind the setter from time to time. Pretty rare, but they do use that as an option. But yeah, otherwise it's fairly standard, and really the evolution offensively there is just the speed. I mean, everything. When we're in system, everything is real quick, real fast, and that's really the main way that we stress blockers, and certainly not just us, but most other teams in the world also use a lot of speed, except for maybe Russia, because they're huge.
So looking at the numbers, what percentage of time when you're running a BIC and it is the I guess either way, whether it's if you're running a quick followed by a BIC, what percentages of the time are you able to get no block versus one block versus two blocks?
It's a good question. I haven't looked at that percentage yet, at least through this summer. But from a subjective standpoint, just knowing what I've coded and knowing what I've seen over the course of World League and World Cup this summer, it's pretty high percentage of time that you're getting one or no block when you're running a quick BIC in system. That's real. Yeah, it's real, especially coupled with the fact that we're able to run with pretty good tempo to our pin hitters. That's just completely overloads it. Puts a lot of pressure even on the wing blockers to make sure that they're getting out to the pins to block, which opens up the middle of the court because they aren't feeling quite as comfortable helping in the middle of the court. And so when you have two options coming at one blocker, that's generally going to be advantage to the offense. I don't know that I would call some of the things that are the traditional, for lack of a better word, stats that we use in volleyball. I don't know that's necessarily misleading as much as some of the things that Joe and I are using now are just kind of an evolution of these metrics. I think a good example is serve receive. I think many people in the volleyball world, especially in the volleyball coaching world, are familiar with a 4-point, 3-point scale, whatever you want to use to measure passing. And a perfect pass is correlated with 4 points, good pass, 3 points, medium pass, 2 points, so on and so forth. And what the rating in that sense is pretty arbitrary. You're just kind of assigning just this kind of hierarchy of numbers 4, 3, 2, 1. But what you're inherently assuming is you're saying a perfect pass is twice as good as a medium pass. And what is the basis of that? How can you really is a medium pass really twice as half the value of a perfect pass, and is a bad pass really a quarter of the value of a perfect pass? So one of the things that Joe did when he got to the women's side, and what I ended up doing when I first got to the national team in January, was we went through he went through over 100 matches. I went through about 100 matches of all the top level teams playing against each other. And we looked at, for each type of pass, so perfect pass, good pass, medium pass, so on and so forth, what was the percentage of time that the team first ball sided out? So they had a perfect pass, what was the percentage of the time they got a kill on that first ball? And then we look at the percentage on a good pass, and what is the percentage at that time, and so on and so forth. And so I don't know off the top of my head what they had on the women's side, but on the men's side, I think what my numbers came out to be was something like 63% of the time on a perfect pass, a team first ball sided out, 59% on a good pass, 48% on a medium pass, 28% on a bad pass. And so instead of going 4, 3, 2, 1, now we're saying, okay, 0.63, 0.59, 0.48, 0.28. And the result of that gave us what Joe calls an expected first ball side out number. And so now instead of getting this kind of arbitrary like 3.0, 2.0, now we're getting this percentage that says
that's actually correlated with the cumulative percentages from the data.
Right, exactly. So kind of getting, having this historical data and kind of applying that, putting that into this context. And now what we can say is, okay, we're passing, let's say 0.55%, and that's what our expected first ball side out number is. And over the course of, a season or a large sample of matches, we can compare that to what the actual first ball side out is in that same situation. And now we can kind of get a little bit better idea, a little bit more context of, okay, well, we're passing a 0.55, but we're first ball siding out at maybe 50%. And so that tells us, our attacking is not up to par with what our passing is doing, or maybe it's the other way around. So there's a little bit more of context within the number to be able to say, to kind of relate to attacking from serve receive.
Right. I'd also imagine that those numbers are very team specific in that, for example, on a medium pass, if your first ball side out percentage, that's very much correlated to how good your back row attackers are. because it's a little bit like reverse co-ed in that you don't, even if you're not passing in system, if you pass to the 10-foot line or 8 feet away from the net, that's a terrible pass if you're trying to set the front row, especially if you're trying to set the middle, run quick, you basically can't do it anymore.
Right.
But that pass at 8 foot is a perfect pass to set the back row.
Right.
So therefore, if you're running basically 5 hitters and you have your full back row strength, then that will definitely affect those percentages. So in other words, you would not be able to take those numbers, I imagine, let's say to the collegiate level, because at the college level, the back row attackers are not going to be as effective.
Yes, exactly. And that's kind of the tough part. Certainly the theory, the idea behind these metrics are really good ideas. The toughest part is, and that's why we went through all these matches and we limited our sample to just the teams, for both Joe and I, we limited our sample of teams to just the top teams in the world. I think on the women's side, there's a little bit more parity up on the top, and on the men's side, there's a fairly significant drop off, after maybe 8, 9, 10 teams. So we're only looking at the top teams and looking at what the level is up there. And just like you said, that's absolutely correct. I don't want to use those same coefficients, those same numbers. Even going from the men's side to the women's side. I know the women's side, on a perfect pass, I think their expected first ball is somewhere in the 50, 55 range, whereas for us it's in the 63 range. So certainly there's, even between the top level men and the top level women, there's some disparity there. And so yeah, definitely even going towards college, and then even college within itself, and I'm even just thinking of Division I, the top of Division I is very different than even the middle or the bottom of Division I. And so it's really about, gathering whatever sample size that's appropriate to your level, and using those numbers. But then the other half of the problem is you probably don't have somebody at your level whose full-time job is to to come up with these ideas and go through hundreds of videos to get a good enough sample size to say, okay, this is probably in the range that we want. So certainly a good idea, but like I said, it's a little bit tougher to come about that just because of the legwork that's involved with it. If I had to come up with 2 names off the top of my head right now that I could think of in the Bay Area, who I'm most impressed with, Haley Hodson, who plays for Stanford. She's a freshman right now. I had the pleasure of being the technical coordinator on her trip last summer with the women's junior national team, where I got to see her train and compete in Guatemala. And certainly there was a lot of hype with her coming out of high school, and between how skilled she is at volleyball and certainly she's has the physicality to be able to play at a high level, and just the kind of person she is. I mean, she's just an absolute sweetheart, and is also a fiery competitor, and works her butt off. I mean, I'm really impressed with her. And then I'm going to be very, very biased here with my other name, which is Justin Lamb, who played at Santa Cruz, who was an outside hitter in high school with me at Sacred Heart Cathedral, and I've always been impressed with him. Definitely one of the better volleyball players that I ever got the chance to play with. Excuse me. So yeah, I think those, in terms of Bay Area volleyball names, those would be the top 2 that pop into my head, at least at this moment.